In today's video, we're going to be running through my team selection ahead of Game Week 3, of course discussing my transfer plans and my potential chip strategy changes, and of course captaincy for this game week. Now before we dive into today's video, of course if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment and subscribe as we're trying to hit 17.5k before the international break, and it is only possible with your guys' amazing support as always. And of course if you've got any dilemmas about your team, get them in the comments. As you can see, this is how my team did get on in Game Week 2. Another disappointing week overall, to be honest. Not a great week. As you can see, a small red arrow. If we'd actually put the Bravkrin goal ahead of a Bergen, we'd have come away with a green. But still, overall, just a lot of frustration, a lot of disappointment, to be honest. I think the biggest strength of this side, though, is going to be the back line, and we're going to speak about it a little bit more when we get obviously to the team selection. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the defenders that we've selected. Murillo's probably the only fraud I would say in there. I would rather have a different goalkeeper as well, but for 4.5, like, I'm not expecting too much out of the Bergen anyway. So yeah, Murillo and Verbergen are probably the only two that I'm not really happy with. Everybody else, I feel, is doing really, really well, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about why I'm so happy with them. The midfield, of course, hasn't been great. Obviously, Palmer did miss out on this game with a last-minute injury. I think he could have done exceptionally well against West Ham if he was fit and available. Tielemans hasn't really done anything in the opening 2 game weeks, hasn't even been hitting DEFCON, so he's been a really disappointing pick. WIRTZ as well, I think it's like 0.32 XGI per 90, which is not good enough, is it, when we're paying 8.5 or now 8.4 for him. If Bruno scores that penalty, I do feel he probably starts to get the word essential knocked about him. He would have obviously hit DEFCON, probably would have been on for some bonus as well. The penalty goal itself, he could have come away with a double-digit haul, and a lot of people probably would have been one of most transferred in players, with Burnley up next. Of course, now people are looking at Mateus Cunha because he looked good in that game and Bruno looked bad because of obviously he missed the penalty, but he scores that penalty, a lot more people are clamouring towards him. So I think, you know, sometimes don't buy into the whole kind of narrative that's going around in the FPL community, because I think we can sometimes do that, and I think maybe look at things a little bit more subjectively and see that actually if Bruno had put that penalty away, which on another day he very easily would, it's a double-digit haul, and he is one of the most selected players heading into Game Week 3. But that is not the case. Salah, again, disappointing, but still managed to be Mohamed Salah. He's just one of those players, and that is why I like picking up those players as well that play the full 90s, because realistically, like, if you've got a WIRTZ who's coming off a little bit earlier, or you say you've got a João Pedro who's coming off in like the 70th, or, you know, a Richarlison or one of those other picks that does come off a little bit earlier, they're not going to be on at the death of the game for those moments. But Mohamed Salah is, and that's why you pay the big bucks, that's why you pay the premium, and that is why ultimately he's always going to be a big captaincy threat, because he does know what he's doing. Watkins, again, really, really disappointing. We're going to have a big chat about him with the team selection, but yeah, again, just overall, another disappointing game week. But I'm not panicking, I'm not too worried about the side. We've got 2 free transfers to potentially go and fix some things within the side, so yeah, let's go and have a look at how the side is going to be lining up for future weeks, my transfer plans, and of course captaincy for this week. If of course you like what I've showed you here, and obviously anything else that you see within today's video, make sure you're going and checking out Fantasy Football Hub. This is obviously their UI. It looks so much better than the FPL one. As you can see, it gives me the live rank. When we look at the transfers, it also gives me AI transfer suggestions, and they are still currently running their 50% off sale as well, so I'd highly recommend checking out their website. Now, obviously, one of the big key factors for this game week is going to be the Cole Palmer situation. Now, I'm going to give you the latest here, and this is coming from Physio Scout. Of course, make sure you're going and following them on Twitter. A really, really good account, of course, to keep you updated with kind of like injury news, because a lot of managers, they do lie in press conferences, whereas these guys give you a good rough estimate based off, obviously, like, you know, medical information. So I think this is a lot better because, like, you know, you've got your Eddie Howe's, you've got your Artetas. Those guys are just notorious liars and don't obviously tell the truth. So this is what we've got here. So obviously Cole Palmer went for a scan. It is not as kind of, you know, worse for as they feared initially. So it has come back, and either it's only going to be 1 week with potential tightness, or if it is a grade 1 tear that he has done in his groin, it is only going to be a 1 to 3 week period that he potentially could be out. Of course, we do have the international break next week, so maybe if, of course, we're getting some kind of, positive news around Maresca, maybe like the Fulham game's just not quite ready for him, but he will be back after the international break, it could be worth maybe just benching him this game week, because Chelsea still have some great fixtures coming up. Now, of course, that could also flip on the flip side, where maybe this could be the week that we sell Cole Palmer, especially if you're on the free hit 6 strategy, because that's his other great game where you probably want him. So you would be able to, of course, go and get Cole Palmer back within the side for free hit game week 6. After that, I don't think he's really a captaincy option till maybe around game week 9, and that probably would be the next period you would want to go and get him. So if we are maybe getting that information that he is going to be out for a little bit longer, maybe it is going to be 1 to 3 weeks, then this could be the ideal week to sell him, especially, like I said, if you're on that free hit 6 strategy as well. If, of course, it is just tightness and it's going obviously day to day and it looks like he could play in the game week 3, I personally don't think he's going to be a sell then. Fulham have been very hit and miss. Like, I really couldn't say how Fulham are going to perform, and that is kind of their trend throughout the course of their recent stay under Marco Silva within the Premier League. Like, you never really know what Fulham are going to turn up. Are they going to beat you? Are they going to be, thrashed? Like, it's just one of those where I don't really know how to predict Fulham, so I still think it's a pretty good fixture for, of course, Cole Palmer, but this is something that we are, of course, going to have to monitor over the next few days, see what Maresca says in the press conferences. Of course, they are the early kickoff as well, so we might potentially get some team news on that front, but of course, that could always be very, very dubious, so I wouldn't be heavily relying on early team news or leaks for that information. However, if you are convinced that Cole Palmer is going to be out, what I have done is put together a list of my top replacements. Now, after I made this graphic, of course, Cunha decided to rise to 8.1 million, so that is the only potential change that you would have there. He is now at 8.1 million, but everyone else you can see here, these are some of my top picks for this game week. Now, of course, I already own Bruno Fernandes. I still think he is going to be a good buy for me personally. He's still going to be on the penalties. I don't think because of one bad penalty he's all of a sudden going to be taken off them, so I still think he will be the penalty taker for this Manchester United side. I still think he's going to be a good option. He is, of course, hitting DEFCON, was very, very close in game week 1 as well. Like I said, if that penalty goes in, hits DEFCON, probably some bonus as well, you're looking at a double-digit haul there, so it swings and roundabouts. It's very, very close. Cunha, though, did look good. He looked very, very impressive. I still don't think Benjamin Sesko is going to be playing this game. I think he'll probably play the game tonight against Grimsby. They'll see how he gets on. But overall, for me personally, I do feel like Cunha is still a really, really good option. Longer term, I am a little bit worried, like obviously City and Chelsea in the next few, not ideal fixtures. I think for a short-term punt, maybe if you've got a wild card, probably like game week 6 or within the next few weeks, maybe even game week 4, then, of course, he could be a decent short-term option. Longer term, though, I do think, there's probably going to be better options, and I think there's going to be people steadily eating into his minutes when, of course, Xerxes back. Obviously, Sesko's fully fit and available and ready to play every single game. I think longer term, there will be people that, of course, do eat into his minutes. Now, the other options, of course, do come in around that more budgety price point, so it does free up a lot of money. So maybe if you've got other adjustments, maybe you want to look at potentially upgrading that second striker spot. Maybe you want to even go to 3 strikers. Maybe you want a bit more premium defenders. Maybe you want to target one of those DEFCON defenders that has been doing so well in the opening weeks. Then, of course, looking at a Kudus, a Semenyo, or a Sarr could be a really, really good option. Now, I really like the top 2. I really, really like the top 2. Sarr, I think, is probably a buy for next week. Of course, Crystal Palace play in the Europa Conference League qualifier, and I do think that will, of course, affect their game against Aston Villa. That's 2 games, obviously, extra that they've had to play already in this Premier League season. I think the lack of Eze isn't as big a deal as some people are making out. We've seen 2 games without them with Eze. They've still been pretty creative. They've still had a lot of opportunities. So I overall, wouldn't be worried too much about that. I would say, though, that for me, like I said, the ideal buy point for me does feel like game week 4. However, Sarr has got a terrific record against Aston Villa. So if you do want to invest in that, and maybe that's something that you do look at, then of course his head-to-head record is pretty stupendous. Kudus for me, I think could be a great shout. However, it does seem like Spurs are still in the market for maybe a 10 or a winger. And I just think there's just too much unknowns for me heading into that Spurs side. I think maybe I'm going to wait, if I'm going to bring in a Spurs attacker, till game week 4. I think by that point, of course, we'll have the conclusion of the transfer market. We know if they bought Savinho, we know if they bought Paqueta. Maybe, of course, if they do buy another winger, Kudus becomes the number 10. If they don't, does he stay out wide and just has the assist potential rather than the goal threat? Because we've not really seen that with his underlying data so far. So yeah, I think there's still a lot kind of unknowns at the moment, and that is probably the area why I'm a little bit hesitant to, of course, put them off. But Spurs have looked very, very good in that regard, especially going forward. So of course I do want to, of course, invest in him. The other guy obviously playing against Spurs this week, obviously one of the top scoring he is the top scoring midfielder within the game right now. His XGI, of course, is the best I've found as well for midfielders, which is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely just smashing it out the park at the moment. And I think he's had the most shots already within the box. Like, the guy is getting opportunities. Of course, the big concern is what impact it has when Kluivert is back. He switched wings this week, but still looked pretty good. So, of course, I still think he's going to be the wide man for this side. I think his minutes are going to be pretty secure. He's got a pretty decent injury record. So he probably is looking like my standout option in my personal opinion. Bournemouth still look a very, very good and overall creative attack within the first few game weeks we've seen as well. And I still think they're going to be one of those sides that are, of course, going to be pushing kind of, the top 10 this season. And I think realistically, he could have a Brian Mbeumo breakout season. We've seen kind of, last year he was sort of there. This could be the year, of course, where he does hit that next level, of course, starts to creep into double digits consistently, and that might be an area that we need to monitor and, of course, invest into. Okay, wasting no time, let's take a look at my team then ahead of game week 3. Starting off with our defence, like I said, I'm actually really, really happy with a lot of the defenders. The two areas that I am, of course, a little bit concerned by is Verbergen. Brighton defensively have looked a little bit shaky across the opening few weeks. However, personally for me, I don't like making goalkeeper transfers. I don't think there's too much upside in me, of course, changing a 4.5 million. I'm probably just going to stick it out up until the wild card, of course, unless Verbergen maybe picks up an injury. Maybe the Burnley defence, maybe Dubravka comes in for this game week. Looking at, the Fantasy Football Hub model, it actually has selected Dubravka ahead of Verbergen, but it's extremely tight for this game week in terms of their predicted points. So maybe that's an area we, of course, do take a little bit of a look at. Like I said, though, that defence I'm really, really happy with. Tarkowski has hit DEFCON in his opening 2 games already. Very unfortunate not to have kept a clean sheet in game week 1 as well, but very fortunate to have kept one in game week 2, of course, with the penalty saved by Jordan Pickford. So swings and roundabouts, but the reason I'm happy is because of the DEFCON. I knew heading into this season that DEFCON was going to completely change the game, and I think a lot more people are going to be playing 4 or potentially even 5 backs this season with those, of course, defensive contribution monsters. You've taken a player's baseline points from 2 to 4 for most defenders within the game, and you can't really say that's happened for strikers within the game. Obviously, if a couple strikers start going off, then maybe we have to look at potentially being a little bit more flexible in the striker position. But overall right now, I do feel like just the baseline of those defenders creeping up to a 4 ahead of a 2 is just going to slowly start to add up across the course of the season. Like I said, Tarkowski has already hit DEFCON in his opening 2 games. That's an additional 4 points we're already seeing to his scoreline already. That's 1 extra clean sheet, of course, without him playing, or already playing 2 additional games if he didn't keep a clean sheet. See what I mean? These are all starting to add up already. Same with Anderson as well. Was very close in game week 1, hit it in game week 2. Very comfortably in the end as well. So again, just another one of those DEFCON monsters at 4.5. Not the most ideal fixture for him with, of course, Chelsea away. But again, if he comes away with, like, say, a 1-0 loss and he comes away with a 4-pointer, I'm not moaning, I'm not complaining, especially when I'm playing 4.5 million for him. The one I do feel a little bit kind of missold on is, of course, going to be Murillo. Him and Milenkovic were sold as these, absolute DEFCON beasts. They haven't really been that, have they, so far? However, the Forest fixtures are still there. So I'm not going to, of course, sell him for the next few weeks, but he is one of those players that I think when the good fixtures go, because he's not hitting DEFCON right now, he is going to be a player I am going to, of course, look to sell, and it probably will be for Lacroix from, of course, Crystal Palace, who has hit DEFCON twice within the opening 2 weeks. Again, I am really, really big on these DEFCON monsters. Pedro Porro as well has been very, very impressive, taking a lot of set pieces. His underlying data as well is starting to tick along nicely, and I do feel eventually we are going to get a big haul out of this guy. Of course, he goes away from the traditional kind of other defenders within our side that we've selected here, all being the defensive contribution monsters. But like I said, Spurs are looking a lot better over defence. Thomas Frank is prioritising clean sheets and obviously overall defensive kind of stability this season. And like I said, with him on set piece share, he just feels like a nice steady Eddie that is just going to tick along for kind of, long periods of time. And there's some good fixtures coming up for Spurs, so isn't going to be a priority sell for now within the side. Head into the midfield, and I don't feel as optimistic here as I did with my defenders. Of course, like I said, there is quite a few problem players ahead of this week. We've spoke about Cole Palmer already being flagged. For now, he is going to remain within the side unless we get any further updates from Maresca himself. I just don't overall feel confident on the full list of midfielders that I went through. So, I'd rather just, sit on my hands, take 3 into the next week, rather, of course, take out a player that could do exceptionally well in this game week or future game weeks, and maybe, it just doesn't feel like I've got a clear and obvious plan to go for. If I was going to go for anybody, it was going to be Semenyo. That's the guy I would, of course, select for Cole Palmer. He would be my top pick. That would be the one that we would select. Tielemans, like I said, has been disappointing. There's rumours of Asensio potentially coming back to the club, so he might even lose his penalty appeal. So he's going to be one that maybe, again, because he's playing full 90s, isn't the biggest priority right now. But over the next few weeks, as we build more transfers, he is going to be one of those players that I'm definitely going to have to, of course, start to look at. Salah, not a great fixture, and WIRTZ, not a great fixture for either of these two. However, if you look at the head-to-head record between Arsenal and Liverpool, there always seems to be quite a few goals flown within those games, not too many clean sheets, so hopefully WIRTZ and Salah potentially could take a full involvement of this. And people have asked me, am I going to sell WIRTZ? I think I was a little bit rational on Twitter after the Newcastle game. I was like, look, it's got to be time to go, another poor performance. But I'm looking at it, I am thinking, am I going to sell a player right before he plays Burnley and Everton? Probably not. I think he is probably going to be within my side up until game week 5. I think maybe he might have a little bit more space, a little bit more creativity against those sides that are, of course, playing low blocks. I think the first 2 games have been real intense Premier League games where maybe, that's quite difficult for a player just to settle in and realise the harsh nature of a Premier League. Maybe when he is playing against those low blocks, he is going to be able to find the line, break those passes, you know what I mean? He is going to have more room, more time on the ball, maybe just feel a little bit more comfortable. And I think as well, the team, of course, will gel a little bit more around him. So I think he's probably going to remain within the side till game week 5, game week 6. But of course, still, things can change, obviously, if Ekitike continues to deliver. Of course, we might have to look at potentially bringing him in game week 4. Bruno is going to be my captain. He always was the plan for game week 3, was to give him the armband. Things still haven't changed despite the penalty miss. I think, it's a great fixture for United at home. I think Bruno is probably going to be running the show. And I think Amran has to change things a little bit. It hasn't been great. And I do think he's maybe got to look at potentially Bruno's positioning within these games. So I'm hopeful that, of course, maybe he does feature a little bit higher up the pitch, but if not, he is going to hit DEFCON again. He is, of course, going to probably, hopefully get some attacking returns within this game and do quite nicely. But of course, we do have other options. If Cole Palmer's fit and available, Fulham at home isn't a bad fixture, or Salah as well. Like I said, I think there's going to be goals within that Arsenal game, and going against Mohamed Salah always does feel scary, so he always is a decent option for captaincy. And completing our lineup, of course, is going to be Ollie Watkins. We're still rolling with the solitary forward, and I still do feel like this is a strategy. 4-5-1 still feels like a good strategy if, of course, I had selected the right players. I still don't feel like there's any forwards people are absolutely clambering to go and get out at the moment. I still feel like there's a lot of problems within that forward position. Of course, Haaland is a great shout. You know what I mean? He is always going to be a good pick, isn't he? Watkins hasn't really done the business. Gyökeres has got some difficult fixtures coming up. Obviously, Liverpool this week, City in game week 5. Not ideal fixtures to be paying, again, 9 million for a striker for. Obviously, João Pedro, there's still the question marks around minutes when Champions League kicks in. So there's still doubts within every single forward. Obviously, Chris Wood, again, how are his minutes going to be managed when European football comes around? The fixtures are there, though, for him for the next few, so could be a short-term pick. But longer term, I do worry about him as an option. So again, there's still no standout kind of leading striker, in my opinion. I feel like, obviously, if we'd gone João Pedro last week, we'd have been on a fat green and we'd probably be sat here yep, things are fine, things are ticking over, things are doing fine, we've got our 2 transfers, we can make some moves within the midfield. Of course, though, Watkins hasn't been doing the business and he has been disappointing. There's no way of getting around that. But I can't really sell a player ahead of what for me personally feels like an absolutely great run. If you look at a lot of the projected goal numbers for the next few weeks, Villa and Watkins are right up there, right towards the top, and it just doesn't feel right with me. Maybe I'm just sitting on a player for too long, and maybe, you know, Villa have been disappointed, but I do think they will get better and they will become a better side, and Watkins will get opportunities to score goals. I don't think all of a sudden overnight he's just become a bad forward or a bad pick. I still think the fixtures are there. Again, it's probably going to be one of those where maybe we do just sit it out for the next few weeks. Maybe, of course, like I said, we do look to change things if he does blank again and Villa do look to get poor, but still, I think he's probably going to be one of those players that does remain within the side, and probably just have a little bit of patience and faith within Watkins that, of course, a lot of us were hyping him up to be in pre-season. Let's then go ahead and take a look at how the team is lined up in Fantasy Football Hub. Like I said, if you want to go and check this out, they're still running their 50% off sale. Link in the description for that one. And as you can see, this is what the Fantasy Football Hub AI has selected as my strongest team for this game week. It has actually selected Dubravka ahead of the Bergen, which is very interesting. And it's also suggested Salah as the captain for this week. Like I said, going against Mohamed Salah is always going to be difficult. He's always going to be one of those players that scores regardless of the opponent, in my opinion. So even still, if I've got maybe some doubts around Bruno, we could have just stick it on Salah. It's a home fixture. It's at Anfield. Why not? Why not fancy him, to be honest? In terms of, obviously, the website as well, it does give you some AI transfers. So just give it a few seconds for it to do these. These are the transfers that it has recommended for me. Then obviously Cole Palmer being flagged, it has suggested potentially going for Semenyo. I don't mind that. I think that's a pretty like the swap I was probably thinking anyway. And then it's also suggested maybe going and upgrading one of my 4.5 million strikers to Mateta. Again, I don't mind that as a move. I think obviously I'm a little bit cautious this week with obviously bringing in some Crystal Palace players with the European game, but longer term they've got some good fixtures. That's, like I said, that's why Sarr was on that list. And Mateta as well could be a steady Eddie at 7.5 million. Obviously hasn't really hit the ground running so far in the Premier League, but could do in future weeks with some good fixtures coming up. So I don't mind those kind of transfer suggestions from the AI there at all. Of course, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you are liking, subscribing for more content on the FPL Tom YouTube channel. And if you've got any questions about your team as well, get them in as we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. But thank you for watching today, ladies and gentlemen, and good luck in Game Week 3.